Okay, so it looks like the audio is silly. That's okay. But welcome back to the stream for the Q&A portion of our wonderful Shadowdark RPG series. I know that I was on the edge of my seat, and the people here can attest to it because they saw me the whole time, even though that y'all didn't. Um, but if you have questions for our wonderful players, then you can put them in the Twitch chat and I will relay them to the people here. And at that point, I am going to hand it over to Carl and Melanie, Jennifer, Mary, and Donna, or as you know them, Clara, uh, Lara, Rose, and Bruga. So, yeah, I'm going to hand things over to y'all.
All right. Um, while we kind of wait for you guys to formulate whatever questions you might have for us, I just wanted to first thank everyone, thank all of the players here today. Thank Molly and Rebecca, who I don't believe is here today, who also was key to uh, making this happen. It was a lot of fun for me anyway. I won't speak for anyone else, but I very much enjoyed the opportunity to do this. And in putting it together, there was a decent amount of interest in um, uh, among librarians who were interested in joining this game as a player. And uh, we more or less just to find the players. We kind of went a little bit first come first serve, but also I was interested in people who had different amounts of experience with playing tabletop role playing games, because that it is fairly representative of the type of thing that you might get if you wanted to run programming at your library. And uh, that is something that is challenging to do. If everybody is like very experienced, you can kind of jump in. There might be other challenges that presents, but really teaching everyone here a new game as we played is a viable option in my opinion. I think we minimally accomplished that. Um, and in fact, Jennifer, you had said, I think at the in the very first stream, that you had a little bit of experience, just having played. I think it was a single time, a little bit of maybe Dungeons and Dragons, but otherwise not a whole lot with this. Uh, it can be done in a way that is helpful if you are running programming to patrons who maybe haven't had much experience but are curious. Again, I do think that this particular game is a good example of the type of game to use. It's one small book. Most of this is not even rules, and an even smaller set of that are the things that players need to know before you start. This isn't the only example, but I think it's a good example. There are plenty of games with plenty of themes. We went with kind of a classic D&D puzzle dungeon type of experience. So if you have people who are interested in that type of experience, but maybe intimidated by, there's a lot of different D&D books that are out there. This is a reasonable and not just reasonable, I think a great option. But there are other themes. There are more comfy and cozy themes that aren't necessarily eyeball dungeon uh, oriented or that type of thing. So there are plenty of games that offer that type of accessibility. But that's not the only barrier that I think libraries might encounter when trying to run that sort of game. We wanted to also present a challenge of kind of meeting several times in a row to come together and play a game. And while ours was definitely orchestrated in terms of we set our dates and kind of said, hey, we want to do this as a model. That was no guarantee that everybody was always going to be able to show up. So that in any role-playing game is one of the biggest challenges. When can people meet? So what we'd like to do is kind of discuss some of those things. However, I do see a couple questions have come in, and I'll start with George has asked, for those of us who are new, how was the experience for you, and how and for those who have not who have role played before, how was this different for you? So Jennifer, would you be comfortable going first on that?
Okay, I'll give it a try. Um, I think I mentioned when we were doing our 0 session that I'd had 1 or 2 sessions with some friends, like in college, where those characters that I spent a lot of time creating backstory for then died, and then I'd be given a pre-gen character, and that character would not die. And so I had no interest in being invested in this character, but you could keep coming back enough for a couple of sessions to be able to play and see what other people are interested in these games for. But it also felt a lot like playing Mario with my cousins. My cousins had the game system, so they could practice it a lot and didn't have the patience to let me fumble. They'd be like, let me get you over that. Let me get you over that. And as you were asking about how to set it up at libraries, we were having this discussion, finding a group that's willing to work with novice players instead of wanting to go full speed is a very important aspect to recruit who's willing to bring up new people versus who only wants to go full speed. And it just helps set expectations and awareness of the types of things you might be doing differently.
Awesome. Can I ask, because I did a little bit of check-in with my players in between sessions to see how things were going, and uh, I don't know, maybe Jennifer, you might be planning to share some of what you shared with the rest of us early on about um, some of how that first session went, then the questions you had after that, and then kind of moving forward from there. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I took a whole lot of notes during our first session, and it was a bit stressful just the setup of like technology stuff that first day. Um, so learning that this was a space that's calm enough to make these notes and then follow up with you, not worrying about interrupting gameplay to stop and say, okay, what's happening right now, but to just take a whole lot of notes and then follow up with everyone like by email afterwards or in the weeks intervening to then find out, oh, okay, if this happens again, these are things I could do, or these are things that I don't have to worry about or don't affect gameplay as much in this system versus systems I'd been exposed to and seen. I'm like, oh, I need to know that. I need to know that. And I really appreciated how mellow this game system was and how you introduced things like we'll assume a lot of things and allow things that aren't always tolerated in other game systems. And I learned a lot from listening to the other players, how they visualize the system. And so that's helped me remember some people will just visually see what's happening next and think about those parts. And I can start keeping notes to remind myself to think about those going forward.
I love that so much. I also really did appreciate your question more recently, um, because I do see that happen. This thing that I'm about to say happen with uh, almost every player at some point fairly early on, has this question of how do I interpret or dissociate or associate the knowledge that I have versus what my player has. And that can go two ways. In particular, you were worried about kind of the metagaming of I know things my character doesn't know, but that can go the other way too. People have questions about, like, my player's supposed to be hyper intelligent and I feel average, like how do we do that? And there's ways through that, and I really like that question a lot because I think it well, I just like it because I like thinking about these things, but I also personally feel it shows that somebody's being thoughtful about what is happening in the game and really wanting to be a part of that in a cohesive way. So I really appreciated your questions that way. So others of us have varying amounts of experience, and I might go to I know your character names a little better than I know your names at this point, so I apologize for that. But I might go to Mary next, who at the outset said she's been a longtime player of tabletop role-playing games. So George's question for more experienced players is, how was this maybe different?
Um, this was different in that it was a very simple game to get into because the setup was fun, but not overwhelming the way some games can be. And this is the first time since the 70s I've ever played a character with less than 5 hit points who lived. And I actually jumped on the back of a boss with 2 hit points, my maximum. And I thought, this is it. This is going to be the end. But it brought back some fond memories because I remember not lasting, I mean, starting character after character after character in the day because we had no death saves in in the beginning. If you died, you just pulled up another character sheet, and I had one on standby for this game. But yeah, it brought back some really good memories. But I I liked how simple this was to get into. It was very um, familiar with beginning with just very few statistics for your little character and a very little idea of where you would go with it, and just trying to fill out your party and see where everyone's going. What I miss in current play, and I've tried to play again in recent years, is that there needs to be a kind of a team aspect of playing. Um, Now I see a lot of players in newer games want to have it all. They want to be a one-man band and be able to do absolutely everything that's needed for the party. And I was glad with this game that when we set it up and we talked to each other beforehand to see, okay, who's going to be a fighter, who's going to be a healer, who's going to be a magic user, and who's going to be a thief. And it worked out very well playing off of these skills and relearning how to do that with a group without relying on one player to take care of every big boss and one player to take care of all of the thinking and the healing and figuring things out together. So for me, it was different in that it really, really felt like working together for the first time in a long time. And I love that.
I love that too. It, it, uh, and thank you for that perspective. Uh, I'm gonna say this a little tongue in cheek, but sadly we didn't see how the dying condition works, just in terms of like learning the game. Uh, but it is uh fairly aggressive, but not as aggressive as some of the older games where at 0 you're dead. The end. That just for because it came up, the way death works is that when a character goes to 0, you have the dying condition, and that starts a sort of death timer, and where a player rolls a d4 and has uh, that number plus their constitution modifier although if your constitution modifier is negative, you can't have less than 1 turn to until you are dead. That's how many turns until you are dead. So if you get hit with a monster and you have 1 turn until you're dead and your turn is next, at the end of that turn you're dead. Like, it's still pretty aggressive, but it does build in a little bit of time for your friends to help you. And one of the things I like about those types of systems is that versus a death saving throw type system, which I also like for other reasons. But in that, there's almost a comfortability of, oh, there's some time. Like, they're going to be able to make some rolls, and which takes me out of it a little bit, because if my friend is hurt, like, I need to go help them. So it for strategic groups, like, it adds a little bit of comfort to the whole thing. So this is an interesting death type of system, and I like that. And the needing to work together, Clara, like, giving the healing because everyone is pretty low, is awesome. So I do see we have a couple other questions, but Clara, oh, there it is again. Melanie or Donna, would you like to share your experiences?
I kind of wanted to jump in just because like the death conversation came up, and yeah, and this kind of like ties in with what Mary was saying too. Like I played a little bit of D&D with my family like in the 80s. You know, it was like I can't remember what edition it was. It was like whatever my brother brought home. But yeah, there was like a little bit. It was like I remember it being like much more limited. Like I always wanted to play a wizard, and of course I had like, you know, like 4 hit points or whatever, and my brother kept killing my wizards. and, but yeah, there was like that kind of element of I just felt like very like concerned. Like it was like, okay, like I'm the healer. Like I felt like I was going to be responsible if anyone died, and so I felt like a lot of anxiety. Not like necessarily in a bad way, but it was just like, okay, this is my job to do on the team. I have to keep people from dying, and the way that the spell casting worked is like much different from D&D, where it's not like you have a set number of spell slots. It's like you get to use the spell until you fail it, and then you're done. So it's like, okay, I really cannot fail at this. Um, and so yeah, I was like, you know, just kind of like I just felt like that responsibility, and then on top of that, like not having the greatest stats, and so like I'm rolling like very mediocre, but it was like just enough. And I loved when Melanie brought up like, oh, like you're good enough, like you're not using up too much of your god's power. It's like so yeah. I don't know, like it. I felt the anxiety, but then like being able to succeed at it kind of like gave me a big boost, and you know, just like having that teamwork component like come in and like all work out. I don't know. It made it a lot of fun for me.
Awesome. George offered a couple comments as some of you were talking too. Rose, he said that he started in 1985, so he knows this feeling as well, and offered that Pathfinder Second Edition uh, y- uh, has a reward system for teamwork, though also notes that that system is pretty rules heavy, so it can be a lot to get into, but the reward for teamwork is a nice feature of that game. And a really good question, I think, that is uh, salient to if you're running a game at your library and a player dies, right? That doesn't feel good, especially the further you kind of get along with a character. You start to form attachments. At least I do. And it doesn't feel good for most people when when their character dies. And some of that, I think, helping somebody through that happens at the before the game ever starts. So this is I didn't quite run this game for various reasons to the letter of the way Shadowdark is written. But it is a fairly lethal game in a lot of cases. And but we talked about that. That was part of the call for participants. It was noted there that your character could die. You should expect that could happen. We talked about it at our session 0 as well. So it wasn't necessarily an unexpected thing for anyone here that could happen. And I think that's an important piece to bring to whether or not that is something that's really going to be on the table. There are games where that's not even like, there's role-playing games where death is just not even a thing. You're playing through something completely different. You're having different experiences. Some of the solo role-playing games that are out there are more or less just like journaling exercises. There's a lot of interesting games. So I think setting the expectation is the first thing. And then if it can be a meaningful moment when that happens. So the kind of the bigger, more dangerous fight in this particular adventure. Who was it? Was it Bruga that was at 1 hit point? Yeah. So that we could have kicked into that dying condition pretty easily with just one more point on the die roll, and that may or may not have been a heroic moment. Bruga was able to do a lot of damage to that creature before she got hit, and that really set up Ulara being able to land that final blow, because it was I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was quite close. It was quite close. And that's a heroic moment. And if you can kind of emphasize those things, that's really on the person running the game to make that happen. But there's no. It is hard. It is a hard thing. So, all right. So there's other things in the chat, but I want to give Melanie a chance to speak to this experience as well.
Sorry. One thing is, one of the people who runs a game that I'm in does have a general policy that he won't kill your character below a certain level. So that it's like you're learning your character, you're learning the game, you're new to it. You have that grace period where something will work out. And then once you reach a certain level, he's like, okay, just so you guys know, from this point on, lethality is on the table. It may happen, be aware. And then there's like the discussion about that so that people are all set with it. But it's also not your first experience of the game. You promptly get killed off in the first few sessions, which I really like. Running games, I'm not actually good at killing characters at all or trying to damage them. So that's something that I haven't had to explain with people, but I really like his take on it, where give people time to learn what they're doing and get into it. I really did love this game and the teamwork we all had working together and figuring out how to make it work. I was so worried I was going to get us all killed with the looking at things. And I like the magic system because it is very interesting that you have the option to keep using the spells until you fail. It's I hadn't been sure how that would work with like balancing how much spells you have, but it is pretty easy to lose one, like the detect magic going. And I will admit that while I'm glad I did not botch and have the magic failure chart go, it was very interesting sounding. And I loved the torch thing. That was a nice addition of just creepy that I would be tempted to bring into other games just for the attention to that.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because I would probably run our session 0 a little differently, and maybe even because of what we were doing here, right? There were these 3 2-hour chunks, so that immediately there's like a math problem there that I could have made a little more tense, because you kind of had plenty of torches to do a lot of things. So I might in the future limit that in some way. It is a key element to this game. And kind of coupled with that, I know we talked about this in character development, but I'm not sure that I mentioned it in the stream, but there is no dark vision in this game. So bringing that element to other games might require a little creativity there, or different things. But yeah, I love it too. I love it too. Thank you. What else we got here? All right. Molly says it's not your fault. Your brother was killing the party's healer. So
Yeah, I do feel like he was a bad DM. Like looking back on it now, like at the time I didn't know, but like looking back, like with experience, just like, oh my God, he was like horrible. Like I would not play with him again.
um, another question: since we're thinking about how to run these longer campaigns, how does your process differ for running this game versus a one-session game? Players. So that was for me, and then there's a follow-up question for the players. How do you feel your playing process evolved over the course of these 3 sessions? Oh, that's interesting. This type of game versus one-shots. I would not run a puzzle dungeon, although in total this was like 6 hours of play. Like you could do a longer one-shot with this particular puzzle dungeon. But puzzles are, I've said this earlier, pretty tricky. I don't know. For new players, maybe I would. It would depend on the players, and I think that's a big part of it. Is who is at the table? How experienced are they? Um, one thing that Melanie brought up was the idea of I'm not going to kill your characters. And by the way, it's not me; it's the monsters. The monsters aren't going to kill your characters at these very low levels. And some of one of my good friends that I play with, who's also a DM. Uh, we were talking about, and he observed that Wizards of the Coast in some of their newer adventures at low level, uh, really those adventures, some of the introductory stuff is not combat based, so you're not really in peril, but it's designed to almost teach you how to play a game, and you succeed or fail in other things that are other types of skill checks that teach you the basic mechanisms of the game, so you can kind of go through and do those things, level up your character, and not have that danger element as much. And so that's an interesting approach to kind of achieve that same type of thing as well. My long running game is we're on a short break here, but we're 2 years in, and we established early on that it was going to be long trajectory character development. It's probably the slowest leveling game any of you will have ever heard of. I might try to speed it up a little bit, but we're still like pretty uh we're lower level than anyone here probably would expect for playing almost 2 years now. So I do adjust things based on what the table expectations are, what the length of game is. And my DM style is very different with that group as well. They are tactical players. They like to run a very crunchy game. That's hard for me. I love games and gaming, but I'm not actually that good at them. So in terms of like strategy, so I really find value to other resources that help me out in like running monsters and things like that, because they're very tactical, good players, and I want them to have a good experience. That's not what I was doing here. This was completely theater of the mind. My other group is playing on a grid with minis and are counting squares and things like that. This is a little more nimble. It can be harder to run a game like this if you're unfamiliar with it. One of the tactics we employed, which I think is good no matter what, is every room had like a distinct thing that you could call out and remember that room. And so while I did some spatial like mapping in describing things, it was more about like that was the room with the tube and the green glow, and then you mentally mapped it when you found the green glow from the ceiling, right? Without knowing exactly where you were, you knew exactly where you were. So tricks like that really help in running any type of game, but especially something that's completely theater of the mind, which can be faster and easier in a lot of ways. So I think I wandered off topic there, but I'd like to toss it over to other people, so I will shut up now. But maybe I'll start with Donna. The question is, lost the question. How do you feel your playing process evolved over the course of these 3 sessions?
Oh, I think mainly it evolved in the way I tried to think about the puzzle. I think I went in from the beginning just thinking like, okay, I'm like part of a team, like we're working as a team, and I tried to keep that consistent the whole way through. But I guess like the way I approached the puzzle changed a little bit over time, because I really didn't know what to expect going in. Um, I don't I don't consider myself like great at puzzles to begin with. And then with my character also like with her stats, like I knew she was not going to be like the sharpest at puzzles either. So I was like, okay, that's okay. I'm just going to like kind of go with the flow and see what happens and like play around and trial and error. So yeah, I think mostly is just building a little bit off each session, like, okay, we found this last time, and just kind of keeping that in mind, like using what we found, like how will that change how we approach like the next room that we go into. Um, I don't, that's kind of like all that I can think of right now that
Awesome. I hope Rose is still with us. I hope Mary's still with us.
I am.
It's
There's
not going to
just stuff
end.
going on in the background that you don't need to see.
Okay, fair enough. So the same question. How do you feel your playing process evolved over these 3 sessions, if it did?
I always get more comfortable as we go along, and I hope that I'll be able to do that for my students. Um, I work at a community college, and we do have a group that is interested in playing and learning to play, but I have to consider that they have classes and other concerns, and they're stressed, and I want our sessions to be stress-free, except for your character could be in trouble here. Um, so as I played, I got a little more comfortable as we went along, and I hope that I can carry that over into teaching students how to enjoy the game. Just relax. We're not going to spend, the month developing a big long character sheet and have you die in the first 5 minutes. Don't worry about that. This is going to be quick and easy and fun, and we can carry this on for as long as you guys want to carry this on. So I think that I'll be able to hopefully make people feel more comfortable as they go along the way I have with this game. I really like the mechanisms of the game. And thanks for bringing up the torch idea. Oh, that is just spectacular to remember that you have to see by torch. And we all have light vision, not dark vision.
Although that's all Kelsey in designing this game. And brilliant, small but important thing that's really fun. Yeah. Um, Melanie.
I also found it interesting just getting used to the character and getting used to the other characters to figure out how we were each doing things about it. Because the first session, it's always figuring out who you are as a character and then figuring out how you're all working together, where by the end we all knew if something shiny goes, Rose will be doing research and poking at things. Will probably be me. And Laura and Ruger are the ones who are saving the day from the sensible standpoints. It was a lot of fun, and I found it getting a lot more comfortable as it went on. But hopefully, yeah.
Cool. And Jennifer.
I think the first session I was doing my thing that I do as a human, which is overthink. It's like, I've got to know all the answers. I've got to have some scripts. I've got to know things to say so there's not quiet. It'll be like, we're slowing the game down. So by the end, I was able to get to a space where I am not my dice rolls. Like if I roll a 2, it's not me. If I roll a 20, it's not me. But and to really see it as a team, that it's not a solo that's like bringing along a lot of people. It's very hard for me to trust that because I've been in places where teamwork is never rewarded, but so much of real life really is teamwork. And then finding when you do work through the drama of teamwork and it starts to actually synergize and run, it's almost hard to believe it's that easy. Learning how to use the active voice instead of saying, I don't know what I'm allowed to say here. Are these things I can ask? Is that the character asking? Like, I don't know what the character has. So learning to change to a more active voice. And then the level of stress was very high at the beginning. Negative stress, right? Because there's 2 kinds of stress. There's exciting stress. It's like, oh, what happens next? And there's negative stress of like, I am going to panic and run. So from what we've seen here and this kind of time session piece, and maybe towards what Mary Kay was asking about, is to plan like these episode pieces. And part of that builds into the cognitive load, whether it's emotional cognition or just learning the game cognitive pieces. But like you said, a scaffolding place of how to use a dodge roll. What does a dodge roll mean? Does it calculate with this or that? It's interesting the way games and education can support each other, and unexpectedly so.
Yeah, wow, I like that observation. That's part of what I think about in research is like games and learning, and what do we learn when we're playing a game, even if it's not like a game designed to teach you something explicitly. Yeah. Cool. Well, we have more questions, so I want to make sure we get to them. And Rebecca, especially in a library setting where folks might not know each other and play styles can vary wildly, it's always important to me that the game master is providing a fun experience for the players versus working against them. And they note that they prefer. I prefer that at my own tables too. The less like antagonistic approach. I yeah, I don't. Uh, hmm. This is a complicated thing. I like introducing antagonism, but I don't like it to feel like it's coming from me directly. I don't want that to be the case. I want to be fans of the people at the table and present them challenges that are challenging enough to make them feel heroic. But again, this is to Rebecca's point. This is really important to establish the type of game that you are all sitting down to do, and make sure that everybody is on board with that. So yeah, because it's fun to not really have a lot to worry about and just like beat up on things. That's fun too. George, because you talked about it being theater of the mind and mentally mapped, did any of the players try to map these sessions? Oh, did any of you literally try to draw out maps as we were going?
I'm usually, oh my gosh. I'm usually like a huge fan of maps. Like, I feel like lost without a map. So I was surprisingly like okay with like not having a map this time. I just kind of like visualized it all in my head. But that's awesome that Mary actually drew a map. I didn't even think about doing that.
It's not really a map, it's just where we were, where we've been. I have one square that indicates a room, and I have a screen written next to it, so I know that that's where we were attacked the last time, and Bruga, and we were in trouble. So I can remember, yeah, that's the bad room, the green glowing room. I just had squares and circles and weird notes. I won't know what any of this means, probably even after tomorrow, but but yeah, I kind of have to, I can picture things in my head, but I'm also old school where we just had a piece of notebook paper and a pencil and we just kind of made notes as to where we were. I do like the mechanism in this game of near, as opposed to trying to figure out 5, 10, 15 feet away. I love that. I love that it's near or it's not, you know. So, yeah, I did draw something, but I wouldn't call it a map. Kind of a journal entry of how well and badly we did. Also, treasure. I kept track of the treasure,
Oh yeah.
including the stingers we took from the bat things.
Yes, yes.
Yes, the two per boss guy. Clara's got her bag.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, Mary, I also like back in the day, like this was my mini on a piece of paper, like just to kind of visualize things. And I did have a map, but
I
but
love the eyeball with the tentacles.
oh yeah, you got that? Yeah, it's there. Um, again, this was not of my own design. This was an adventure that is available on Drive-Thru RPG, and called the Seer's Sanctum. And you know, if anybody does check it out, you'll see I did like change a few things. A lot of that was on the fly based on interesting decisions that you all made, that I thought were cool. I'm like, yeah, you're going to discover something because of that cool idea, even though it doesn't say that in here. Um, uh, I, I, I personally like that way of doing things. I think it's freeing for me. It's much more fun for people playing. That, if they didn't look in the right drawer, they can't progress the game. I don't like that idea. So, all right, maps. Um, Rebecca asks, what did you learn from this experience that you will bring into your library programming? Oh, I'm going to kick that all to others to respond to. Other than to say that I am hoping to introduce this particular game to the role-playing club at my university at some point. I think it's got a lot of that club has a lot of traction and interested people. So I don't think it will be a difficult sell to maybe run this. Now that I've had the opportunity to do it, it was a lot of fun. So that would be my thing. But in terms of setting up library programming, do any of you have thoughts?
So I moved libraries last year after being at a library with like a very active like D&D group among our teens. So like in my current library, I'd started trying to get like a D&D group together last year, and it kind of fizzled out. And so this year is like, okay, I'll just try like a few one shots, like trying different games. So we did like Monster of the Week, like one time in October. I did sort of like a creepy monster one, like around Halloween. And then I found like a D&D one shot by Kobold Press that was like really like simple and easy. That was set in like a cold, sort of like frozen climate that I was like, oh, that'll be like fun for the winter. And so I did that, and then I got like some new middle schoolers to come in for that one. It's like totally new from last year, and like they were really into it, and then like they wanted to come back the next week and keep playing. So I was like, I didn't have anything planned, but we have like a room that is available, and I'm in charge of making the desk schedule. So it's like, all right, I can put myself off the desk. And so I was like, all right, fine, we'll like play again. And I had set it up with like pre-made characters, and like I just kind of took I'd already like started playing Shadowdark with this group. So I was like, okay, I'm not gonna bother trying to explain the rules to them. I'll just kind of like uh we'll kind of explain things as they go, as they come up. So I was kind of like telling them on the fly, like, okay, this is how you do your attack roll. This is how you do your initiative roll, and just kind of explaining it like a little bit at a time, so it wasn't like overwhelming. And that seemed to work really well for them. And so we've done like 3 sessions so far, and they're starting to pick up on it. and starting to get easier, and like that they want to keep playing. So I'm just kind of incorporating like what they want to do into it. So they all just want to like fight against each other, and so I gave them like X cards. It's sort of like the safety device. It's like, okay, do you want him to attack you? No? Okay, put your X card out. Okay, like you don't get to attack him. Do you want to attack the zombie instead? Yes, you do. Okay, we'll attack the zombie instead. But like they kept trying this with each other, even though they didn't want to die. That was basically the thing. Like they wanted to fight each other without dying. And so I was like, okay, how about next time? Why don't we just do like a little tournament and it won't affect the rest of the adventure? You can all play against each other and see who wins, and like, you know, no one will die for real. And so like they were into it, so we're just gonna do that. So I'm just kind of like letting them decide what we do and just like explaining it a little bit at a time, and just kind of, you know, like the rules are there, but like it's not the focus. They're just sort of like in the background. So that's kind of like the biggest thing that I've implemented, is just like, you know, we don't need to worry about the rules too much.
I love that. Yeah. Anyone else? Things from this that might inform your programming?
I may use the consent in gaming form that we looked at before the zero session, because this is not something that was even a consideration back in the day for me, and I have encountered some uncomfortable scenarios because of it, and I think that this is a valuable tool to introduce to today's gaming people. So I will definitely use that as we used it in this experience.
Yeah, I definitely also appreciate kind of outlining those things in advance, and then having mechanisms in place like the X card, or can we pause for a minute? Because you can't necessarily cover every base. Like, yeah, like thumb-sized grubs are gross. Maybe that really wasn't something somebody was thinking about in advance, and we could have just cut it there, and that was it. So anyone else? Because I think this is our last question.
I would just emphasize like what Mary said. I was able to share the consent in gaming list with a professor, because we have a before term starts day and we talk about things. The theme this year was like trauma informed education. Like, we're going to have difficult conversations in this class. How do we bring in tools so that students don't shut down or feel they have to push themselves through those conversations? And so just giving that kind of a list to one of the faculty members who's like, I don't know where to even start that conversation. It was a nice transfer of a game to a learning space without needing to say like, you need to come learn this game to use the tool.
That's awesome. I feel so great about that. So
Yeah, definitely using the same form and such, as opposed to just having, so these are the general behavior guidelines in the library that you're going to have to carry over with this. Here's some further information. So it's clear ahead of time what you can and cannot and what we won't be touching on. Sounds wise.
yeah, I think that's helpful too, because it is a collaboratively built experience. It's not just like me telling you all this is what it is and isn't. Yeah. So, well, that is the time that we have. So I'm going to kick it back over to Molly. But also, again, thank you all so much for kind of putting yourselves out there and being part of this. It was so much fun for me.
Okay, thank all of you. All of you being Carl and Melanie and Donna and Jennifer and Mary. But also thank everyone for watching and joining us on this Shadowdark adventure. If you liked this kind of program that we've done, this longer form, please let us know, because we are definitely interested in doing something like this in the future. If you have questions that we didn't have time to address, you can always send them to our ALA email, or you can find us on our Discord or our Facebook group. Those links should be in chat. And I can relay them and have people answer them for you. But yeah, overall, thank you so much for coming, and make sure you follow us so you can see all the fun things we do in the future. Okay? Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.